Hey guys, in this video I'm going to show you how to create the yoke in separate pieces, and then once the yoke is created we'll continue down creating the bodice, and then we'll create the arms, and then from there I'll show you how I complete the front pocket yoke as well as the cuffs. So to begin, I'm going to go with this Michael's pumpkin colored yarn that I found, and then I'm also going to go with the I Love This yarn in the color Royal. And then you'll need your standard crochet hook, your scissors, your darning needle to sew in your ends later, as well as some stitch markers. For this particular project, I've been looking at a lot of videos on top down, and they always suggest for some reason that you use a 5.5. So that's what we're going to go with here. This is everything that you need, and from here I will show you how we begin calculating the sizing. Okay, so I also forgot to mention that you'll need a tape measure to measure different parts of the body for this. The first thing that we're going to need to measure is the neck area. And for me, I've already done that. I came up with 14. And because I'm doing a jacket, you might want to add 2 inches to that. So instead of using my exact measurement of 14, I'm going to add a couple of inches, and then I'm going to take it up to 16. From here, you would normally make a chain that would be the same amount of stitches as the length of the measurements that you're going to go by. And I'm going to show you how we're going to alternate that for this technique that we're going to use to create the yoke. Okay guys, so as you see here, I went ahead and made some calculations of what the stitch count would be for the sizes that you see. And this is general sizing for most people. And what I mean by stitches is if you were doing the standard method for the yoke, for instance, mine is going to be a 16. That means I would create enough stitches in the chain to be the same length as 16. For me, that would be 60. You may want it smaller, you may want it larger. It's your choice, it's your desire, however you want to do that. But because in this technique, we're going to do the yoke pieces separate, we're still going to have the amount of stitches that you need, but we're going to do a little trickery. If we were doing a regular yoke, it will look like this. And remember, we're doing a bomber jacket, so we're going to have an opening here. We're going to have our increase areas in each corner like that. That's your back. Your sleeves are here. And then this is going to be, if you had this on, that would be your right panel. This would be your left panel. This is if you're doing a conventional yoke. Now, how these numbers play into it is, since I'm doing 60, I'm going to take that 60, I'm going to divide it by 6, and that's going to give me 10. That 10 is going to be the amount of stitches you need to create for your sleeves. To figure out how many you'll need for the back and front, you could almost add that up and then subtract 60, and that'll give it to you, but that's not quite it. So I'm going to take 10 and multiply it by 2, and that's going to give me 20. And then I'm going to subtract 2, and that's going to give me 18. And the reason why I'm subtracting 2 is this. I'm going to put that 18 here. That 18 is how many stitches you're going to need to begin that foundational chain for the back area. And then that 2 that I subtracted from the 20 is going to represent those increase corners. So that's 18, 19, and 20. And then you're going to do the same thing for a front. But because our front is broken up into 2 pieces, we're going to take that 18 and divide that into 9 for each side. So you have your 9 and 9 for each side. It's still 18, but it's just in 2 separate parts. And then because that's 18, and then you have another set of increase corners, that's 18, 19, and 20. So basically, if you take all of this plus this, you're looking at 40, because that's 20, plus 10, plus 10. So you got 40, 50, and 60. And you could do this calculation with any of these numbers, and all the math is going to add up the same way. But here's the thing. Because I'm doing the small size and I'm going to do a total number of 60 stitches, and because I'm not doing them in one continuous chain, I'm going to break it up, and this is what that's going to look like. From here, I'm going to begin creating each chain to show you how we're going to factor in the increases so that we come up with a yoke that's gonna be the basis or gonna be the start of how we create this jacket. Okay, so to begin creating all of our yoke pieces, we're gonna start off doing the back yoke by creating a chain. And since I'm doing the 60, again, you're going to have to do the calculations on your own based on the size that you choose, and then you'll go from there. Okay, so there you have it, 18 stitches. Now the next thing we need to do is create our first row. I'm going to chain 1 after my 18th stitch. And then I'm going to chain again, yarn over. And I'm going to go into that first stitch, which was the 18th stitch that I created. I'm going to go into that stitch once and create my first double crochet stitch. I'm going to go back into that same stitch, and that's going to create our first increase. So even though I began my first stitch, that first stitch also needs to be an increase as well. And you're going to do that on each side for your first row. So even though the foundational chain started off as 18 stitches, because the first row is going to require increases on both ends, you're going to end up with a total of 20 stitches. So I just about completed this first row. And I'm at that last stitch. I'm going to go in here and create 2 stitches in that last stitch, 2 double crochet stitches in that last stitch. And then I'm going to chain that off, turn my work. You should have a total of 20 stitches for that first row. Yarn over. Go into that first stitch, create your first double crochet, go back into that same stitch, create a second double crochet in that same stitch to make an increase, and then continue on until you get to the last stitch of the second row. We're at the end of the second row, and I'm about to go into that last stitch. I'm going to go into that last stitch once, create my double crochet stitch, and then I'm going to go in there a second time to create a second double crochet stitch, and that's going to be my second increase in the second row. And I'll chain that and turn my work. You can already see that it's starting to fan out. And depending on how many rows you make, it's just going to fan out even more. And that's going to be the back of the yoke that we're going to create. For my size, I'm going to do a total of 18 rows for each piece. I'm going to create the 18 rows, and then I'll show you what that looks like before I move on to the other pieces. Okay, so this is what the back looks like after 18. And I've marked my front because I identified the front with the tail hanging to the bottom left. The next thing that we're going to do are the front panels. To do those, it's going to be slightly different. This is what each panel is going to look like. And you're going to start here. You're going to create a chain of 9 stitches, and then as you can see on one side you're going to be increasing on, and one side you're going to keep consistent. You're also going to do the same thing for the opposite side, but you're going to be working in reverse. I'm going to create the right panel first, so that's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Then I'm going to lock that in with an extra one, and then I'm going to create another chain to start my first row. So there's your 9 stitches, and creating that first row. When I put this on, this is going to be the right side. I'm going to put the increases on the right side. So we're going to yarn over, go into that first stitch right there, and add 1 double crochet. We're going to go back into that stitch again and create a second double crochet. And then from there, we're going to work all the way into the end of the row. Now, because we're doing the front panels now, and I'm working on the right side of the panel, I'm not going to add an increase to the end of this row. So I'm going to complete this row and turn my work and show you what I do next once I get to the end of the second row. I'm just about finished with the end of that second row, and that's the last stitch for the second row. I'm going to go into here, create my first double crochet stitch, then I'm going to go back into that same stitch and create a second double crochet for my increase. I'm going to chain off, chain again, turn my work. Okay, so this is what our panel starts to look like after 2 rows. If you start your foundation chain of 9 stitches or however many stitches that you do, once you do your foundation chains and you create that first row, keep in mind that when you go to do the second panel, instead of putting the increase, because I put it here, instead of putting the increase on that first row at the beginning, you're going to add it at the end. Once I get my 18 rows, I will show you how that looks as well. And the reason why you want to work in reverse, because for the second panel, so your stitches line up. This is what the right panel looks like after I've completed my 18 rows. That's that straight edge, as you can see. And then there's that outer edge that's going to fan over into the sleeve area. I know that this is my front because again my starter tail is at the lower left, so I marked it. And now I'm going to create the other panel. Actually, I've already done it. So here, even though I started with the tail on the lower left, you can see that the rows do match up because I worked in reverse over here. And those are the 2 front panels. The next step is to create the sleeve. So I started this foundation chain with 10 stitches and then I increased on the outer edge of both sides and that gave me my sleeve. Same thing, 18 rows for the back piece of the yoke. And you don't have to worry about working in reverse for this because it's going to work up just like the back. You're just going to create your foundation chain and then you're going to make increases on the outer edges and it's all going to line up anyway. So you have your 2 front panels, you have your sleeve, and you have your back yoke. You have to create the other sleeve and then we'll join this all together. Okay, and there you have it. Not only did I complete the second sleeve, but I've also joined all 5 pieces together now. We have our front panels, we have our sleeves, and then we have the back yoke. I chose to do a slip stitch on this because I wanted to make sure that I could go in and line up those rows absolutely perfectly so you can see how much detail and effort that I put into that. And I used a single strand of yarn instead of doubling up because I did not want those stitches sticking out that you sometimes see. I also wanted to say, now that it's complete, it looks pretty similar to what a standard yoke would look like if you were starting with a foundational chain from the top and then working your way down and building on your rows. It's now time to separate this yoke so we can create sleeves and a body. If you guys are enjoying the content, I would very much appreciate it if you would like, comment, and consider subscribing. This is a very easy way for me to be able to bring you more content. With that being said, we're at the point now where we are going to try this on. Okay, so here I am trying it on and turn around, ignore the wrinkles. For me, this is pretty much a good fit. Just have to take this point right here, or this edge, and attach it to this edge. I have to create a chain that's going to fit my armhole area, usually about 2 inches for me. I don't know what that'll be for you, but you're going to create a chain that's going to make this fit like this. And then from there, that's what's going to be the start of creating your armholes for your sleeves, as well as the part for your body. Also, I wanted to mention, those who have seen my previous videos know that I like to do this double line design going down all of my sleeves. So if you refer to like maybe my Sporty shrug video, I'm not going to show you how to do this design in this just for the sake of time, and I don't want the video to be too long. If you refer to one of those videos where I am featuring this design, you'll see exactly how I did create that. In order to separate this so we can start doing the sleeve area and then the body area, we're going to have to create a chain. Before we begin, I went in and I cleaned up all of the loose threads that were at the bottom edge of this, because once I start working, I wanted to make sure that all of this was clean. And now that I've done that, I'm going to create a link for the armhole area. That's going to start from here to here. I'm going to chain 15 to connect the two of these edges. That way it will separate the armhole area to the rest of the body, and I'm going to do the same on this end. So now the armholes are linked, and instead of doing 15 stitches for this, I actually just ended up doing 10 because I really did just need 2 inches of space. And at 10 stitches, this actually became 2.5 inches, which is fine. And that's what it looks like on both sides. Another thing is too, because I'm using this blue yarn, which is the main part of the body, I wanted to make sure that I put this linked chain at the middle, because if I put it too close over here, then the blue would have spilled over here and it would have created a crooked line. So keep in mind, if you're doing color blocking, you want to keep one color, depending on the color. It doesn't really matter, but you want to keep it as close to the center as possible. That way, if you decide to go with one color, it won't spill on to this side, or if you decide to use this color, it won't spill on that side. And I did that for all 4 corners. And now that I've created armholes, I did try it on again just to make sure that the link wasn't cutting in my arm area. But now I'm going to create the first row. Keep this in if you decide to mark the fronts like I do. That way you won't confuse yourself on where to begin, or you don't want to get your pieces mixed up. This is pretty much the outside. Once we completed the yoke, we now have an outside of a fabric and we have an inside of a fabric. We are now going to create the first row of the body, since that's the color I've been working with. And I'm going to save the arms for last because you can clearly see that I'm going to have to go back and do all of this tapestry in here. Now, because I did 18 rows and the last row on each of my pieces is a raised row, I can continue and create the continuity that I'm going to need to make this look uniform. So I'm going to go in and add my yarn. I'm going to tie that off. And then I'm going to begin on this first row, going into this first stitch with a double crochet, going into the next stitch, double crochet, and I'm going to work double crochets all along this edge until I get to the armhole, and then I will continue through the armhole, picking up this chain and adding my double crochet, so all of this will become part of the first row. Once I get to this area, I will show you what that looks like. So now that I'm to the end of this area and I'm about to go into this new arm area where this chain is, you want to make sure that when you attach that chain that it's not twisted, so you can pick up your stitches easier. And now that I'm about to go into that, you just pick up that next stitch like so. Make sure you don't do them too tight so you'll be able to get in there. Continue on until you get through this arm area, and then through the back, and then through the other side until you get to the end on the other side. Okay, so now I have completed the first row, which is really the 19th row. If I was wearing this, I would have started working from the bottom of this left panel of the front, and then I went across what is now our arm area, and then I'll come back and I'll do that arm. And then I went all across the back yoke, through the next arm, all the way into the right panel and to the end. So now to finish this off, I'm going to continue turning my work and working down until I get to about maybe 30 rows. Now, because most of these projects are customizable, if you wanted to do a crop version of this, you can do that. But keep in mind, I'm also going to be including some waistband detail at the bottom. So if you wanted to do a crop version and you just wanted to keep it plain, you could do that. But if you want to continue following along the way I have the tutorial set up, you can stay tuned for when I get to that part of it. Okay, you can see that our jacket is really starting to take shape now. You can really see the body starting to form. At some point, I'm going to taper this because I don't want it to be too straight. I want to kind of have it fitted to the body, but not too fitted. I just want a slight taper. And then from there, I'm going to go back and do the armholes, which I'm definitely going to do off camera. I probably won't show that much. I'll probably just come back and show you what one completed arm looks like, and then I'll go and finish the next. So I'm going to try this on just to give myself an idea of from here how far I want it to hang, and then I will be back. Okay guys, here we are. I've tried it on, and I wanted to show you how this fits with one of my loose t-shirts on. This t-shirt is a size large, but I want to show you that there's no gaping in the back of this. It fits nicely around the arm area. Look how smooth that is. And then the front will come together once I include a zipper or some kind of closure. But that's where we are at 30 rows. I think I'm going to go down another 10 rows to see if I like that length. And I don't want to create this part too long because, again, I still want to add a ribbing to the waist area. But so far, so good. Okay, the bodice is exactly how I want it. It's tapered the way I want it. It's not gaping out too much. And then the armhole is smooth. Now that I have my jacket where I want it, it's time for the arm. So now we're going to build the rest of our sleeve. First thing we have to do is catch up on these stitches here. When this was a chain, it was a V, and we basically just went in one side of the V to create the row that became our body. We're now going to go into this other side where you see these loops and create the rest of our sleeve. We're going to start with that center stitch. Going to grab our yarn. And tie it off. And I'm working on the outside because when I go into building on this existing sleeve part of the yoke, that I want to keep my rows consistent. If it's off on this area, it doesn't really matter, but going into the sleeve, you definitely want to make sure that you keep that continuity with the sleeve stitches so everything lines and matches up. And we're going to start here in the center. The reason why we're starting in the underarm area is because it's going to create a seam, and putting it here, you won't really see it as much. So we're going to go in here and create a first stitch by chaining 2. You're going to yarn over and go back into that same stitch to create your first double crochet stitch. If you start in the front, you're going to go left, you're going to go around until you get back to the start. So you're going to go left to right and work that way. Depending on what your stitches look like, you may start on the front, you may start on the inside, but I'm starting on the front because the row for the sleeve, I want to make sure that the stitches are consistent so you don't see the difference between where I stop this yoke and I'm going to continue on to build this sleeve. Going into that next loop, create your second double crochet stitch. Continue on with your third. And you'll keep going until you get to this edge. Okay, so once I got to this end, I put 2 into that last stitch before I got into the orange section because it's going to pivot this entire area. That way I don't have any gaps. And if you do get gap, just go back in with a needle thread that color and just kind of tack it on the inside so you can close that a little bit. I do it all the time when I see little minor imperfections to avoid having to take the whole thing loose. And from there, you can work the normal stitches. Now that I'm almost at the area where I put my stripes, you can see that that's lowered, that's raised, and then that's lower. So I need to keep my rows and my stitches consistent all the way down the sleeve so that you don't see the difference between me creating a separate yoke and working top down. And just continue to work around until I get to the other side. And once I get there, I'll show you what the next step is. Now that we're at the end, we'll close off this row. Next row, we're going to turn our work. I'll chain 2 before I turn my work. So that's the end of the first row. I also started the first row on the other sleeve. Now here's the thing about working the sleeves. I like to do them simultaneously. That way I don't get the rows that I do the decreases on mixed up. So every time I do a decrease on one sleeve, I write it down and then I continue to do it on the next sleeve, and I keep going back and forth between the two sleeves until I get to the end. That way I know I'm matching because I wrote it down. If I miss anything, I can go back and check it. I'm probably going to do a total of maybe 30 rows for the sleeve because it's just going to get smaller and smaller and smaller. Here's why I'm not going to walk you all through how to do the sleeve. One is because everyone's arm measurements are going to be different. Some people may want a straight sleeve all the way down. Some may want a gradual. Some may want it fitted. However you do that, make sure that you're marking down all the rows that you do to decrease. And again, I like to do them simultaneously. That way I don't have to get to the end of one arm and then forget where I started my decreases in the other arm. Or you can put stitch markers on all the rows all the way down where you did do the decreases, and that'll help you remember as well. I'm going to do about maybe 10 rows and see what that looks like. I'm at 10 rows now on each arm, and what I did from that starter row was I did a decrease of 4 decreases, and I did the decreases in random areas on that row, and I created 10 rows. I did decreases in every even number row. So I started with what became row 19 that began the sleeve, and then I worked my way down. My even number rows just happened to fall on the inside of the jacket, and this is where I am at 10 rows. I'm gonna go down another 10 rows, continuing to do the alternating decrease on every other row and see where I am from there. Okay, so this is what 20 rows look like. And I went from decreasing by 4 at row 10. Row 10 was the last row that I did a decrease by 4. Once I got to row 11, I didn't do a decrease. And then once I got to rows 12 through 16, meaning 12, 14, and 16, those are the rows that I did the decrease, but I only decreased by 2. Then I went down until I got to row 17, and from 17 on to 20, I kept it consistent, and this is where I am now. From here, I like the width of it. I'm going to continue all the way until I get to about my wrist area. That looks like maybe 20 more rows, and then I'll come back and show you what it looks like from there. We are now at the final stages. I did a total of 39 rows. This was when I was at row 20, so I just kept a marker in, and then I added 19 rows to that. So that's a total of 39 rows. If you count from when I created my yoke, which was a total of 18 rows, and then add on the 39 that I completed it, that's a total of 57. The next thing to do is to add the cuffs, add the collar, and add the waistband. In order to add a cuff, you have a couple of options. You can go into the edge of the sleeve, and I would start from the inside of the seam, which is about right here. I would chain up, and then I would build on the cuff that way. And there are several videos that show you how to do that, and I believe I also have a separate video that shows you how I added rib cuffs to the edge of a sleeve. That's one option. You can do that several ways. You can do a double crochet ribbing. You can do a half double crochet, single crochet, whichever one appeals to you. You can even do a slip stitch like I did in my first jacket. So here in this jacket, I did a slip stitch, and I like this because the slip stitch, in my opinion, is really strong, it's really thick, and it has a lot of elasticity to it. For the sake of this video, we're going to go along with attaching the rib that looks like this. And you don't have to do it the way I did it. You can choose 2 other colors if you would like. You can even do 3 colors, whatever appeals to you. So not only are we going to do the cuffs, which I've already done, I'm just going to attach it using a slip stitch. And then for the waistband, I'm going to create this same ribbing. The ribbing for the waistband is going to be the same as the cuff, only you're going to do it longer. Now in this video, for this particular design, I've created whatever this is called. And it's going to hit right here in front of the jacket. And then from there, I'm going to create 2 of these. I've already done this. I'll show you how I created this. And I'm going to put one here. And then from there, I'm going to attach the ribbing. So in order to create the ribbing for your waistband, you're just going to simply make the same amount of stitches that you create for your cuff. And then you're just going to keep making one long extended piece until you get back to the edge of both your plackets, or whatever this is called, so that you can attach it on this end and it'll fit both pieces. So I'm going to show you how to make this part first, and then I'm going to come back after I've created a piece long enough for my waistband, and then I'm going to attach it to these pieces and then show you what we do from there. To begin creating our placket piece for our waistband, we're going to chain 16, 15, and 16. Chain an extra one and tie that, lock in that knot. And this is just a series of slip stitches. I'm going to go into that first loop, slip stitch into that chain. We're going to go into that second loop. Take it right into that next loop. We're going to go into that third. The fourth. Once we get to the end of the row, we'll chain 1 and turn our work. From the beginning of the chain, you're going to go into that first loop. Be careful about your stitching on these first rows, because sometimes when you go into the next rows, it can be tight. So you want to watch your tension on that. But you just continue going through the loops until you get to the end of the row. From row 2, you just continue to work your way up until you get to the desired amount of rows that you need. You want to create enough stitches with this that it matches the width of this. I'm going to create the second piece for this, and then I'm going to create my waistband. And once I do that, I'll come back and show you what to do next. Once the faceband facings and the waistband are attached, it will look like this. I'm simply going to attach it to the bottom of this jacket. As you see here, I've attached my waistband to my jacket, and I did so with stitch markers so I could get a good fit. And from here, I'm just going to do a simple slip stitch to attach both pieces, and then I'll go from there. So now that I have my waistband attached, and I've already done my cuffs, I'm going to attach the cuffs to the sleeves, and then the next step will be completing the collar. So I was thinking before I moved on to show you how to do the collar is that I want to actually remove these cuffs. I feel like they compete too much with the stripe on the sleeve, and I was worried about just doing them over in a solid color, same way I did this, doing a half double crochet stitch. But because I have the front facings slip stitched, I think I'm going to do the slip stitch on the collar as well as the sleeve in a solid color, and I think I'll be happier with that. Okay, so as you see, I just removed the previous cuffs, and I'm going to go in for the new cuffs using a 5.0 crochet hook. So to begin, I'm going to go into one sleeve, and I'm going to locate that center seam, which is right about here. I'm going to add my yarn and tie it off. I'm going to do a chain of 12 since that's the same amount of stitches I used to create the width for my waistband. Once we complete our chain of 12, or however many stitches you want, the number of stitches you create will determine how long and how wide you want your cuff. Once you create your chain of 12, you will go into that first stitch, and these will all be slip stitches. Go into that first stitch. You're going to slip stitch inside each chain until you get to the end of the chain. Go into that last stitch. Once you create your last chain, you'll go into that first chain, slip stitch. Then you'll go into that second chain, slip stitch. And from here, you'll flip your work and continue to slip stitch all along this front edge. Going into that last stitch on this second row, slip stitch, chain off, turn your work. Once you complete your second row, you'll continue going down to the bottom. Every time you reach the edge of the sleeve, you'll go into that first slip stitch once, and then you'll go into that second stitch. So basically, you'll be covering 2 stitches in order to create that next row, and you'll continue to do this until you get all the way around to the other side. And as you see here, this is what both cuffs look like complete. I also went ahead and completed the collar as well. The collar is done in the same fashion as the cuffs, meaning every time you complete a row, once you work your way back to the inner edge, you go into 2 stitches before you start the new edge. And then I did that all the way around until I got to the other side. I started off with 2 chains for the first row, and I increased by 1 until I got up to the actual width that I wanted the collar to be. For me, that was 10 rows. So I went from 2 to 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then I worked my way up to 10 rows. And that's the width that I got here. And I went all the way around. This was the halfway mark. So once I got to the halfway mark, I started right about here. And then I worked in reverse. So I went from 10 to 9 to 8 until I got back to 2. So I would say from here till about here, I increased by 1. And right about this area, I was able to get up to 10. And then I worked 10 all the way around until I got back to this side. Being that this was color blocked, this was a good marker for me to know when it was time to decrease on this opposite side. So now that we have our cuffs, we have our collar, the only thing left to do now is add the pocket and install the zipper. And because once I add the pocket to this, it will kind of thicken these layers, I'm going to install the zipper first. Here's a tip on the zipper. I will create the jacket before purchasing the zipper. If you get it too short, then you have to work around your jacket in order for it to fit. And keep in mind, most zippers come in even number lengths, 18, 20, 22, 24. For my previous jacket, the camouflage one, it was a slightly longer zipper. I used a 24-inch zipper, but for this one, I ordered a 22-inch zipper. And the reason why I ordered a longer zipper for that jacket is because the collar comes almost around my mouth area, but for this one I didn't want the neckline to come up that high, so I went with a shorter zipper. For the install, you have 2 options. You can hand sew this down, or you can machine sew it. Since I know how to sew, I'm going to use a machine stitch, and I'm going to stitch it down this way because I feel like that's going to be a little more durable. You can also use a sharp needle with yarn and attach it that way. Because this is a separating zipper, I recommend pinning the top edge of the zipper to the top edge neckline of your jacket, and then going down to the bottom and pinning it in place there. Because crochet is kind of like a knit, you may have to bunch it up a little bit in order for it to fit, but then I will pin it in place, and then I will do that with the other side. I'm going to go to my sewing machine, and then I'm going to attach the zipper that way, and then I'll come back and show you what it looks like. As you see here, the zipper is now installed, and I also went in with a couple of straight stitches as well as a zigzag stitch just for extra reinforcement. And another trick I use is on the sewing machine, you have to use a spool of thread as well as a bobbin. And what I did here was I took the bobbin thread and made it the orange color, and I took the top thread and I made it the blue color. That way when you flipped it over, you don't see blue stitches going down this orange zipper. So that's just another hack if you're doing color blocking. Once the zipper is installed, you want to kind of go back and forth and test and make sure that you can open and close it. And that's the jacket. At this point, The jacket is now complete. The final step for the jacket is to add pockets, which is completely optional. But let's face it, who wants a jacket without pockets? To begin creating the pockets which will go on the front of the jacket, it's a super simple process. This is all double crochet, and I chose double crochet because it will match the body part of the jacket. I'm going to be posting the pattern for how I created this. That way you can pause the video if you need to and work at your own pace. This is both pockets after they're complete. The only difference from doing the right pocket and the left pocket is once I got to row 9, I had to leave off the last 5 stitches so I could do the decrease and then continue to work up from that way. For the left pocket, I had to cut off my yarn after row 8 so I could start row 9 here, leaving those same 5 stitches at the beginning of the row instead of at the end of the row. It's going to be the same, just in reverse. So instead of doing the decreases on this side, I'm doing them on this side. And then once I got to row 12, which is the last row that I decrease on, I do 13, 14, and 15 consistent. Once you complete both pockets, you have the option of putting a lining in them, which is what I'm going to do because I don't want them see-through. I may want to put my hands or put something in them, and I don't want anything that I put in the pocket to stick through any of these stitches. I went and purchased some Fusible Webbing. You take this Fusible Webbing and you add it between 2 layers and you iron it, and it will bond the 2 pieces together. I went and got some thin knit from my stash. I already had this. I'm going to take the knit fabric, and then I'm going to take a piece of the fuse. I'm going to take one of the pockets. You want to make sure that you're working on the wrong side. We know that this is our front side because our tail is hanging this way, but for the web, you're going to put that with the wrong side down. That way, when you iron all of this together, all of that will stick. I'm going to pin this in place, and I'm going to do the other pocket. I'm going to cut around it so I can get it the same size. Okay, guys, as you can see here, the pockets are now complete. I've taken all 3 layers and fused them together by ironing them. This is the crochet side, this is the knit side, and between both layers is the fusible web that you can barely see. I also went back and did a zigzag stitch on this knit edge, so when you turn it over you could barely see it. And then I'm going to go around both pockets and stitch around the edge except the openings, and then that will tack it down to the jacket. Once I do that, I will come back and show you guys the reveal. Once again, I want to thank you guys for tuning into the channel. I want to continue to keep bringing you more exciting new content and tutorials. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and share the videos. I will see you guys in the next one, and you have a great day. Thank you.